It is midwinter, 1219. The city of Otra, in modern-day Kazakhstan. The air is so cold, it burns your lungs. But the heat rising from the citadel is suffocating. You are standing in the main square, surrounded by the stench of burning timber, the coppery tang of spilled blood, and the unmistakable, acrid smell of fear. Look around you. The once great walls of the Khwarezmid Empire have crumbled. The screams of the dying have faded into a dull, rhythmic moaning. But in the center of the square, the silence is heavy. It's expectant. A man is dragged forward. This is Inalchuk, the governor of the city. He's the man who made the mistake, the fatal, arrogant mistake, of seizing a Mongol trade caravan and insulting the envoys of a rising warlord from the east. He thought he was dealing with just another barbarian chieftain. He was wrong. He looks up, his face matted with dirt and sweat, and sees him. Not just a man, but a force of nature. Genghis Khan. The Khan doesn't yell, he doesn't rage. He simply watches with eyes that observers described as cat-like and possessed of a terrifying stillness. Two guards step forward carrying a heavy iron ladle. Beside them, a crucible sits on a roaring fire. Inside it, silver, perhaps the very silver Inalchuk stole, is melting. It's not solid currency anymore, it's a shimmering, lethal liquid, glowing bright orange and white, reaching temperatures of nearly 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit. Imagine the sound, the crackle of the fire, the heavy clank of the ladle. The governor struggles, but iron grips hold him fast. The Khan speaks, his voice low. He says that since Inalchuk loved precious metals so much, he should have his fill of them. The ladle tips. The molten silver hits the eyes first, then the ears. It doesn't just burn, it obliterates nerve endings instantly, cauterizing the very path it destroys. The sound of liquid metal hissing against human tissue is a noise that those present would carry to their graves. It is a specific, engineered kind of agony, a symbolic retribution made manifest in the most horrific, physical way possible. Inalchuk dies, not from the wound immediately, but from the shock and the searing heat boiling his brain inside his own skull. This wasn't just an execution, it was a message, a billboard written in gore for the rest of the world to read. Why go to such lengths? Why not just a sword to the neck? Why create a theatre of cruelty so specific, so visceral, that we are still talking about it 800 years later? Was this the act of a madman? Or was it something far more terrifying, a calculated, rational piece of political technology? To understand the molten silver, you have to understand the mind that ordered it poured. You have to look into the abyss of the 13th century and realize that for Genghis Khan, terror wasn't an emotion. It was a tool he sharpened to a razor's edge. And trust me, Otra was just the beginning. Here is what most people don't understand about Genghis Khan. We tend to view him through the lens of a Hollywood villain, a barbarian sweeping in to destroy civilization because he enjoyed the chaos. But that's a lazy interpretation. It misses the terrifying brilliance of the man. Temujin, the boy who would become Genghis, was born clutching a blood clot the size of a knucklebone. A bad omen? Maybe. But his early life wasn't about conquest, it was about survival. He was an outcast. He ate rats to survive on the frozen steppes. He was enslaved, humiliated, and hunted. This creates a specific psychological profile. He wasn't born into the golden lineage of power. He had to rip it from the hands of his enemies. He learnt early on that mercy in the steppes was a death sentence. In his world, there were no second chances. You either dominated or you were dust. The Mongol philosophy of war wasn't about honorable combat in the European sense. There was no glory in a fair fight. A fair fight meant you might lose. The goal was absolute total victory, with minimum Mongol casualties. And how do you achieve that? Terror. Terror is efficient. If you butcher one city so horrifically that the next 10 cities surrender without firing an arrow, you have actually saved lives. Specifically, the lives of your own soldiers. It's a twisted utilitarianism. The cruelty wasn't the point, the submission was. But there's a deeper layer here. The Mongols believed in the mandate of Tengri, the eternal blue sky. They believed Genghis was the flail of God, sent to punish the world for its sins. When you believe your violence is divinely ordained, the moral guardrails completely vanish. Think about the psychological state of his enemies. You are a Persian Shah or a Russian prince. You live in a walled city with centuries of history. You feel safe. Then you hear rumors. Stories of men who drink the blood of their horses, who cover the earth like locusts, who leave nothing but bones in their wake. By the time the Mongol army actually appeared on your horizon, the battle was already half lost. You were fighting your own fear. Genghis Khan understood the viral nature of information long before the internet. He let refugees escape. Why? Because they carried the stories. They were the carriers of the fear virus. They poured silver in his eyes. They would whisper. They boiled them alive. This was the strategy behind the horror. It was psychological warfare weaponized on a continental scale. But to maintain this reputation, the punishments had to escalate. They had to become more creative, more shocking, and more absolute. He couldn't just kill you, he had to unmake you. He had to erase your very existence and turn your death into a totem of his power. So, let's look at the first major step in this escalation. A moment where the young Temujin decided that simple defeat wasn't enough. A moment involving 70 boiling cauldrons and a rivalry that cut deeper than blood. Before he was the great Khan, he was just Temujin, fighting for control of the fractured tribes. His greatest rival wasn't a stranger, it was his blood brother, Jamuka. They had sworn an oath of loyalty, slept under the same blanket, and exchanged gifts. But power is a jealous lover, and the steps weren't big enough for two sons. The ancient text, The Secret History of the Mongols, gives us a glimpse into the brutal creativity of steppe warfare, but one incident stands out, although sources differ on who inflicted it upon whom. The Persian historian, Rashid al-Din Hamadani, recounts a horror that chills the blood. It was following the Battle of Dalan Balshut. This was early in the conflict, a time when Temujin actually suffered a defeat. The victors, whether Jamuka's forces or the Chinos tribe, depending on which chronicle you trust, captured 70 young male prisoners, nobles, princes of their clans. Standard practice might be to ransom them or enslave them, but the hatred here was personal. It was intimate. Imagine the scene. 70 large iron cauldrons, the kind used for cooking mutton for an entire camp, are lined up in a ravine. Fires are stoked beneath them until the water inside is a rolling, violent boil. The prisoners are stripped, bound. Witnesses describe the steam rising in the cold air, mixing with the frantic pleas of the captives. But there is no mercy here. One by one, the young men are lifted and dropped headfirst into the boiling water. This isn't just death. It is culinary preparation applied to human beings. The physics of boiling to death are hideous. The skin cooks instantly, blistering and peeling away from the muscle. The shock causes the victim to inhale, drawing scalding water into the lungs, drowning them from the inside while they burn on the outside. It is a slow, agonizing descent into darkness. 70 times, 70 splashes, 70 screams cut short. For Temujin, witnessing this, or hearing of it, if he wasn't present, was a defining moment. It crystallized the stakes. This wasn't a game. Losing meant you were meat. This incident, the War of the 70 Cauldrons, marked a shift. It showed that the old rules of tribal skirmishes were gone. The violence had transcended raiding. It had become extermination. And here is the kicker. Later, when Genghis finally defeated Jamuka, he offered his old blood brother a reconciliation. Jamuka refused, asking for a noble death. Genghis obliged, breaking his back without spilling a drop of blood, a sign of respect. But for the rest of the world, for those who defied him, there would be no broken backs, there would be no respect. The cauldrons were just a prelude, a warm-up act. As Genghis consolidated power, he faced a problem. The Tatar tribes. They were numerous, they were treacherous, and they had poisoned his father years ago. He couldn't just defeat them. He had to ensure they never rose again. He needed a system, a metric for genocide, and he found it in the axle of a wagon wheel. It's the year 1202. The Tatars have been crushed militarily. They are rounded up, thousands of them, waiting for the Khan's judgment. Usually, a conquering warlord would keep the women and children, maybe sell the men into slavery, or execute the leaders. But Genghis Khan was thinking in generations. He remembered the poison that killed his father, Yesugei. He remembered the betrayal. He wasn't looking for justice. He was looking for a biological reset. He issued an order that is as simple as it is chilling. It's known as the measuring against the linchpin. The linchpin is the pin that holds a wagon wheel on its axle. In the Mongol carts of the time, this pin sat roughly 3 feet off the ground, about the height of a heavy sword's pommel or a young child's hip. The order. Every Tatar male was to be walked past a wagon wheel. If his head stood higher than the linchpin, he was to be executed. Think about the implications of that. It wasn't a random massacre. It was a systematic culling of an entire generation. Every adult man, every teenager, every older boy, anyone capable of remembering the past, anyone capable of holding a sword, anyone capable of harboring a grudge, gone. The line of prisoners would have stretched for miles. The sounds of the executions would have been a rhythmic, industrial thudding. Chop, next, chop, next. Genghis was effectively pruning the human garden. He was using a physical object, a wheel, as the arbiter of life and death. By sparing only the smallest children, those shorter than the linchpin, he ensured that the survivors were too young to remember their Tatar identity. They would be adopted into Mongol families. They would be raised as Mongols. They would grow up loyal to the very man who slaughtered their fathers. It's a masterclass in psychological conditioning and nation-building through erasure. It's the Stockholm Syndrome, weaponized on a societal level. This was the escalation. We moved from the emotional, vengeful heat of the boiling cauldrons to the cold, mechanical efficiency of the linchpin decree. It shows the evolution of Genghis's mind. He realized that random cruelty is just sadism, but calculated cruelty is policy. Historians often debate the numbers, but the effect was undeniable. The Tatar identity effectively ceased to exist as an independent power. They were absorbed, digested by the Mongol war machine. This linchpin strategy sent a shockwave through the steppes. It told the other tribes, I don't just defeat armies, I delete peoples. But as the Mongol machine moved west, out of the steppes and into the sophisticated principalities of Russia and Europe, the punishments had to evolve again. They encountered princes who believed themselves untouchable, protected by God and stone walls. Genghis and his generals, Subutai and Jebe, had to show these arrogant royals that their status meant nothing, that they were just livestock to the Mongols. And that brings us to the Battle of the Kalka River, and a dinner party that holds the title for the most macabre banquet in human history. Russia, 1223. The Battle of the Kalka River. The combined forces of the Russian principalities have faced the Mongol horde, and they have been utterly dismantled. The Mongol generals, Jebe and Subutai, the dogs of war, have captured the surviving nobility. Among them are Prince Mstislav of Kiev and 2 other princes. These are men who believe they are ordained by God to rule. They expect ransom negotiations. They expect a dungeon, perhaps. Instead, the Mongols begin to build a platform. It's a simple wooden structure, essentially a large floor made of heavy planks. They lay this wooden floor down, but not on the ground. They lay it on top of the living prisoners. The princes and their high-ranking retinues are bound and tossed into a pit or a depression in the earth. The planks are placed over them, bridging the gap. And then, the Mongols begin to feast. Imagine the sensory horror of this. You are trapped in the darkness beneath the floorboards. Above you, hundreds of heavy Mongol boots are stomping. Drums are beating. The sounds of laughter, of bones being gnawed, of fermented mare's milk being toasted. Every time a soldier dances, the planks flex. The weight presses down. For the Mongols above, it was a celebration of victory. For the men below, it was a slow, crushing suffocation. The pressure would have been immense, but not instantly fatal. It was designed to last. The princes of Russia died, listening to the laughter of their conquerors. They were literally crushed under the weight of the Mongol celebration. Why this method? Why not just behead them? It goes back to the Mongol superstition about spilling noble blood. It was considered a sacrilege to spill the blood of a king on the ground. It might offend the earth spirits. So, the Mongols found loopholes. We didn't kill him, he suffocated. We didn't spill his blood, the floorboards did the work. It's a dark, twisted lawyer's logic. It allowed them to destroy the leadership of their enemies while technically keeping their own spiritual hands clean. But think about the spectacle. It demonstrates total dominance. We are so superior to you that we will literally dine on top of your dying bodies. It reduces the enemy to furniture, to dirt. The psychological impact on the observers, the low-ranking soldiers who were watching, the local villagers peeking from the trees, was shattering. It said that no title, no lineage, no god could save you from the Mongols. If they could do this to the princes of Kiev, what would they do to you? This incident broke the spirit of the Rus people for centuries. It initiated what is known as the Tartar yoke. It wasn't just a military defeat, it was a psychological trauma that seared itself into the Russian national consciousness. And yet, even this wasn't the peak of the horror. As the Mongols moved into the Islamic world, into the heart of Persia, they encountered cities with millions of people. Cities that dared to revolt. And when a city revolts against Genghis Khan, you don't just crush the rebels, you build monuments to their death. You build pyramids. News of the suffocated princes travelled fast, but it was the campaign against the Khwarezmian Empire where the architecture of death truly began. Let's talk about Nishapur. It was a jewel of the medieval world, a city of scholars, artisans, and poets. But in 1221, a fatal mistake occurred. During the siege, a stray arrow killed Tokukar, Genghis Khan's son-in-law. When the news reached Genghis, his daughter, the grieving widow, demanded revenge. Not justice, revenge. Genghis gave her a simple command: make the city such that it can be ploughed. The Mongols breached the walls. What followed was arguably one of the most concentrated bloodlettings in human history. Ancient historians like Juvayni claim that 1.7 million people were slaughtered. Even if we accept modern estimates that lower this number significantly, we are still talking about hundreds of thousands of human beings. But killing them wasn't enough. The Mongols needed to verify the count. They needed to prove to their commanders that the job was done. So, they started cutting off heads. They didn't just pile them in a heap. They built pyramids, systematically. One pyramid for men, one pyramid for women, and, most heart-wrenching of all, one pyramid for children. Imagine walking past Nishapur a week later. The silence, the wind blowing through the empty streets. And there, standing as grim sentinels at the gates, are massive, rotting structures made of human skulls. This is where the intermittent reinforcement of fear comes in. Sometimes, the Mongols would spare a city completely if they surrendered immediately. They would treat the artisans well, sending them back to Mongolia. This created a gamble in the minds of the besieged. If we surrender, maybe we live. If we fight, we become bricks in a skull pyramid. It was a binary choice designed to paralyze resistance. The fear was so potent that sources tell stories of a single Mongol soldier entering a village and ordering 20 men to line up and wait while he went to fetch his sword to kill them. And they did it. They were so broken by the stories of Nishapur and Otrar that they simply waited for their own execution. That is the ultimate success of terrorism, when the victim is so terrified that they become an accomplice in their own destruction. And the news spread. Merchants, traveling monks, and refugees carried these tales to Europe, to the Pope, to the Caliph in Baghdad. The Mongols were painted not as men, but as the legions of Gog and Magog, the biblical end times destroyers. Genghis Khan knew this. He cultivated it. He once declared, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." He positioned himself not as a warlord, but as a force of karma, a natural disaster with a sword. But the horror wasn't limited to pyramids of heads. Sometimes the punishment was strange, bizarrely specific, and it targeted the very culture of the conquered. As we dig deeper into the chronicles, we find examples of punishment that show the sheer range of Mongol cruelty. It wasn't always about mass slaughter. Sometimes it was about humiliation and the perversion of local customs. Take the case of the city of Bamiyan. During the siege, another favorite grandson of Genghis, Khan, was killed. The grief of the Khan transformed into a cold, black rage. When the city fell, Genghis gave it a new name, Mar-o-Bali, or City of Sorrows. He ordered that no loot be taken, no prisoners, no slaves, nothing. Every living thing, human, cat, dog, livestock, was to be killed. The womb of every pregnant woman was cut open. The city was left as a ghost town, a silent mausoleum where even the animals were silenced. It was a scorched earth policy taken to its biological extreme. Then there's the story of the river Indus. When the Khwarezmian prince, Jalal ad-Din, the son of the man who started this whole war, finally fled to the banks of the Indus River, he realized he was trapped. In a moment of bravery, he rode his horse off a cliff into the river to escape. Genghis watched him go. He didn't shoot. He turned to his sons and said, "Such a father should have such a son." He respected the audacity. But for Jalal ad-Din's family, the women and children left behind, there was no respect. The male children were executed. The women were distributed among the generals. The lineage was severed. It shows the bipolar nature of Genghis, admiration for the strong rival, absolute ruthlessness for the vulnerable collateral. And let's look at the pasture strategy. This is less visceral than molten silver, but devastating in its scale. The Mongols were nomads. They needed grass for their horses. They viewed farming as a bizarre scarring of the earth. In northern China, Genghis seriously considered exterminating the entire population of farmers, millions of people, just to let the land return to forest and grass, so his horses could graze. He was talked out of it by his advisor, Yelu Chukai, who pointed out that taxing the peasants would be more profitable than composting them. Think about that close call. The survival of Chinese civilization hung on a tax calculation. This isn't just punishment, it's a clash of civilizations. The pastoralist view that cities are unnatural excrescences that should be wiped clean. These secondary examples show a pattern. The punishments weren't just about anger, they were about reordering the world to fit the Mongol view. If a city didn't fit the plan, it was removed. If a population was inconvenient, it was erased. It was sophisticated, it was adaptable, and it was relentless. But the greatest punishment of all might not have been physical. It was the destruction of memory, the burning of books, the silencing of history. We often focus on the bodies, the blood, the gore. But the most terrifying punishment is the one that lasts forever, the erasure of culture. While this event happened under Genghis's grandson, Hulagu, it was the direct continuation of the doctrine Genghis established: absolute submission or absolute annihilation. I'm talking about the fall of Baghdad in 1258. Baghdad was the center of the world, the house of wisdom. It held centuries of knowledge, mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, texts, from the Greeks, the Persians, the Indians. When the Mongols breached the walls, they didn't just kill the people, they targeted the books. Eyewitnesses described the Tigris River running black with ink from the thousands of manuscripts thrown into the water. Just pause and visualize that. A river of ink. The intellectual heritage of humanity dissolving into the mud. They destroyed the irrigation canals that had supported Mesopotamian agriculture for thousands of years. The region, which had been a breadbasket since the dawn of civilization, was turned into a dust bowl. Some historians argue that Iraq has never fully recovered from this ecological destruction. This is the ultimate punishment, robbing a people of their future and their past simultaneously. Genghis Khan and his successors understood that to truly conquer a people, you can't just kill their warriors, you have to kill their story. You have to destroy the libraries, the temples, the systems that make them. There is a profound sadness here. How many cures, how many poems, how many scientific breakthroughs were lost in that black river. We see this echoed in the way Genghis treated the Tangut people of the Western Shia. After they betrayed him late in his life, he ordered their complete annihilation. "I will make them non-existent," he reportedly said. And he largely succeeded. The Tangut language is dead. Their written script is a puzzle for linguists. They are a footnote in history, a ghost people. This is the Genghis chill, the silence that follows the storm. It's a reminder that history is fragile, that entire civilizations can be snapped like a dry twig if the force applied is strong enough. But what does this kind of limitless violence do to the man wielding the sword? You cannot drown the world in blood without getting some on yourself. As Genghis approached the end of his life, the psychological toll of being the flail of God began to show. Genghis Khan conquered more land than anyone in history. He had wealth beyond measure, hundreds of wives, and absolute power. But was he happy? The chronicles from his later years paint a picture of a man haunted by his own mortality. The punishments, the executions, the relentless riding, it takes a toll. He became obsessed with immortality. He summoned the Taoist monk Chu Chuji from China, traversing the Hindu Kush mountains, just to ask him one question: "Do you have a medicine for long life?" When the monk told him there was no such medicine, only ways to preserve health, Genghis was disappointed, but accepted it. It's a rare moment of vulnerability. The man who could command death for millions could not command life for himself. There was paranoia too, the constant fear of betrayal. The memory of the poisoned father never left him. The system he built was based on loyalty, yes, but it was enforced by terror. And terror creates a lonely throne. He saw enemies everywhere. His relationship with his eldest son, Jockey, deteriorated into suspicion. Was Jockey truly his son? His wife Borte had been kidnapped and raped early in their marriage. Was Jockey plotting against him? When Jochi died before Genghis, there were whispers that the Khan had ordered the death of his own firstborn. We'll never know for sure, but the very existence of the rumour shows the atmosphere of the court. A place where filicide was a plausible political move. This is the monster of their own making theme. When you build an empire on piles of skulls, you can never truly rest. You have to keep killing to stay on top. Even in death, the terror continued. Genghis died in 1227. We don't know exactly how. Maybe a fall from a horse, maybe illness, maybe a wound. But his final punishment was inflicted by his corpse. The funeral procession. To keep his burial site a secret, the soldiers escorting his body killed everyone they passed on the journey. Peasants, travelers, entire villages. Anyone who saw the hearse was executed. Then, the slaves who dug the grave were killed. Then, the soldiers who killed the slaves were killed. Thousands of people died just to bury one man. It was the final, perfect seal on his legacy. A black hole of violence that sucked in everyone around it, even after the heart at the center had stopped beating. He refused to be a monument. He wanted to be a mystery. He wanted to be a ghost that would haunt the steppes forever. And in that, he succeeded. To this day, no one knows where he is buried. So, here we are. We've waded through the molten silver, the boiling cauldrons, and the rivers of ink. The Mongol Empire eventually collapsed, fracturing into khanates that were slowly absorbed by the cultures they conquered. But the scar Genghis Khan left on the human genome, literally and figuratively, is permanent. It's easy to look at these stories and dismiss them as ancient history. That was the Dark Ages, we tell ourselves. We are civilized now. Are we? Genghis Khan's strategy of total war, of targeting the civilian population to break the will of the leadership, is the grandfather of modern warfare. We see echoes of the Otrar massacres in the firebombings of World War II. We see the psychological warfare of the skulls in modern propaganda and shock and awe tactics. Genghis Khan wasn't an anomaly. He was just the most efficient practitioner of a brutal truth. Power, stripped of morality, is a terrifying thing. He challenges us to look at the cost of greatness. We call him Great Khan. We name airports after him. We marvel at the map of his empire. But we must never forget the sound of the ladle hitting the crucible. We must never forget the people under the floorboards. The lesson here isn't just about a historical figure. It's about the capacity of human beings to rationalize cruelty. When we believe we have a mandate from heaven, whether that's a god, an ideology, or a sense of national destiny, we are capable of anything. The line between a hero and a monster is often just a matter of who is writing the history books. So, the next time you hear someone praise a ruthless leader for getting things done, remember the linchpin, remember the measurement, and ask yourself, would you have been tall enough to die? If this descent into history's darkest chapter fascinated you or horrified you, hit that subscribe button. We dig up the stories others are too afraid to tell. I want to hear from you in the comments. Was Genghis Khan a brilliant strategist who did what was necessary? Or was he the greatest criminal in human history? Is there a difference? Let me know, and until next time, keep looking into the shadows. You never know what you'll find.